Today we're going to take a look at how a player could push better from their trail foot to help them to clear their lead hip. So if you're a player that loses space, struggles to get open through impact, this could be a good one for you. Hi everyone, thanks for joining me again. So today we're looking at how a player could push better from their trail foot to get the lead hip up and open through the shot. Often I'll find that players are aspiring to get the right amount of lateral motion with the pelvis towards the target and a good amount of rotation, but they'll often miss that their lead hip, we actually want it a little bit higher than the trail hip at impact as well. So that's what we call a side bend. So we want to get our lead hip higher as well as the pelvis being open, and as well as it being just slightly moved towards the target. So today we're going to put the focus today on getting a nice movement around that lead hip rather than aspiring to any particular value. The amount of rotation and the amount of lateral players get around that lead hip is very much tailored to them and where their bodies are at. So there's definitely not a magic number. So whenever you're looking at these numbers that are giving out around rotation, whether it's 35, 45, 65, it can be hugely different. So it's more about understanding what is good for that player at that point in time. So today, let's just look and discuss a couple of simple philosophies, concepts that could help a player to move and push better off that trail foot to get that lead hip up and open for a more explosive, more dynamic movement through the ball. So just very simplistically, how we move from the left side or the lead side into the trail side will influence what we can do in the start of downswing. But today I just want to focus on the feel around the trail side and how that might feel for a player when they go into the start of downswing pushing off the ground. So a common area that you'll see with players that they'll want to move away from. Now this may not be a good thing for them to do. It would depend on their anatomy, but you'll often see players lose contact with their heel to the ground early in the start of the downswing. Now, what I was trying to say there is that for some players, it's actually a good thing. For many players, though, that I see that in, it's a movement pattern that's a response to, I would say, not a good enough load into their trail side in backswing, and then having to then a changing concept in how they start the initial start of downswing, putting pressure into the ground. So first of all, I just think the concept of, if we were to put the attention to this front area of the foot here, almost like the pad under the big toe and the big toe itself, as we're moving into, let's just say we're moving into downswing, as we get halfway through downswing, we should be feeling a lot of pressure into the ground in that area of the foot. So that's this front area here again, the pad and the big toe of the trail foot. Now the long bone here on the inside of the foot is actually the line of force when we use our foot. So when we move to the top of backswing, we get into ourselves into a good pressure, so we can actually, you can almost, as you move down, feel the force moving down that line of force into the big toe. And then you can even rehearse the into downswing. So around here we should feel a good amount of pressure in that part of the foot there before we push through. So I get a good amount of pressure there. I want you to pay attention to what my lead hip is doing now through the downswing as I'm putting the pressure into that front area of the foot. You'll notice that lead hip is moving higher, it's elevating, it's opening, and as I push as well, it's getting the lateral that a lot of players are aspiring to do anyway. So we don't always have to put the attention on the segment that we want to see the improvement. We can actually look elsewhere at what's influencing the segment and work away from the problem to solve the problem somewhat. Okay, so that's what we're looking to achieve there, getting that more pressure on the inside there. So a nice way to get a reference of that is to get on a wall, because we want to make sure that when we're doing that, we're not actually like moving too much into the toe. This way we're keeping that good connection with the heel. So if you have a wall there, or you could even grab a cup and hold it like so. So if I go into the top of backswing and I get that visual, that feel of working down the line of force, but I've got to stay almost pushing into the club at the same time, that helps me to keep the heel on the ground and get into a position there where I maintain my space into a nice spot before I push off through the shot. Okay, so that's what I would be looking to do there. Just get as much force as I can in that there. So going back a little bit step further, moving through backswing to be able to put us into a better position for that that concept we're trying to achieve there pushing into the ground. What we want to do is try and keep the knee a little bit more stable for most players. A lot of the time that knee and the hip, there'll be a lot of movement, so they're not actually creating a load into the hip, and then it makes it a lot harder to get the force they're looking for. So I'm definitely not an advocate of keeping the knee in the same flex that it was at address. Through backswing, you'd want to see the knee straighten just a little, but I like it to keep a little bit of flex. And as far as in the hip, pinching the fingers there as we load, so we're moving the belt buckle almost into the pocket. That's a nice sense there. And the feeling of screwing the foot into the ground. So we're keeping the knee somewhat stable, it's straightening a little bit, pinching the fingers there in the crease of the hip joint, and I feel as though I'm screwing my foot into the floor, and then from there, keeping my space, pushing into that front almost quarter of the foot there. That's what I'm looking for. Working with players when doing this, I'm gonna slow it down, get the feel on the instep there. And while we're doing this as well, even though a lot of attention will be into pushing to down there, I would like players to be aware of how the lead hip is elevating, how it's opening, and how it's getting to a good spot moving into the ball. Because if we do a good job pushing into the ground there, we should be able to feel as though we can turn through with the bigger segments and not have to use the hands too much through the shot, because we've got nicely open with the lead hip. So let's just hit a few here, and I'm going to start off with just chipping it. So what I encourage players to do when first integrating this is to really slow things down, feel the pressure into the ground, and get into that spot where they feel like they can just use the body and just chip a few through. Okay, so just taking it nice and easy here. I'll hit one more for you here. So all we're going to do, we should feel a lot of space, players here, when they first do this, if they've been in a pattern where they've not really pushed too well or got the pressure into the ground as we're discussing here. So it should feel a lot of room, and should feel as though you're getting that lead hip nicely open here, coming into impact, where you can definitely just chip a few through. And actually I feel a ton of rotation when doing that there. Okay, hit those ones a little clean there, but I really did like the sense of through the shot how it didn't feel like I had to use my hands at all. So lots of gains there, because obviously lead hip, such a focal point and so important. We move well around the lead hip in the golf swing that you might find a lot of other gains from just doing a better job of loading into that trail side, pushing off it better, and getting that lead hip out of the way.